They say that after 25 years of marriage, you either know everything about your spouse, or you find out you never really knew them at all. It all started at a company party I didn't even want to go to. Just another Friday night full of awkward small talk, watered-down booze, and fake laughter. But what I saw, or rather, didn't see, that night changed everything. My wife disappeared for more than an hour. When she returned, flushed and out of breath, she told me she had been discussing a project with her boss. But deep down, I knew I'd been made a fool. That night kicked off a chain of events I never could have predicted. A private detective, a family torn apart, and a kind of revenge that didn't come with shouting or slamming doors, but with quiet, calculated silence. This is a story about how far a man will go when he decides he's had enough of being lied to, about what betrayal really costs. And believe me, she was served just right. But first, let's go back to that damn party. I never liked going to those work parties of Carla's. Fancy folks trying to impress each other, sipping wine I can't pronounce and pretending the shrimp cocktail is better than it is. But I'm her husband, and a good one at that. So I cleaned up, put on the only sport coat I own, and rode along like I'd done before. Thought maybe I'd get a cold beer and a couple bacon-wrapped whatever they were and be back home in time for the late ball game. You'd think that after 55 years on Earth and 25 in one marriage, I could have seen this coming. Carla works in marketing for some big consulting firm downtown. She's good at what she does. I never doubted that. She's always been sharp, always organized, a natural leader. Over the years, I watched her climb the ladder. Proud of her, I was. But lately, things had started feeling a little off. Hard to put my finger on it. She started staying later at work. Said they were pushing deadlines. Then it was conferences, strategy weekends, after-hours planning sessions. Normal stuff in theory. But the way she'd laugh at her phone then click it off real fast? The way she smelled of someone else's cologne when she walked past me some nights? I chalked it up to my own imagination. I didn't want to be one of those guys, paranoid, bitter, always accusing. That ain't who I am. The party was held at some rooftop bar that overlooked the skyline. You know the type, glass railings, moody lighting, music that's just loud enough to make you talk louder than you want to. I let Carla lead the way. She looked stunning, of course. Black dress, heels that clicked against the floor, hair done just right. That woman always had a way of turning heads, mine included. She floated through the crowd like she belonged there. Laughing, hugging people, talking shop with that tone she uses when she wants to sound more corporate than she really is. I mostly stood off to the side with a paper plate and my beer, listening to some guy tell a story about golfing with the CFO. I smiled, nodded, didn't say much. Wasn't my world, and I didn't pretend it was. About 40 minutes in, I noticed Carla wasn't around. Figured she was mingling somewhere, talking to a client or whatever. No big deal. But 20 minutes passed, then 30. I scanned the crowd, checked the bar, even stepped out toward the balcony where folks were smoking cigars and laughing way too hard at things that weren't funny. No sign of her. I texted her. Nothing. Called her once, but it rang through. I leaned up against a column and sipped what was left of my beer, trying not to feel like a stray dog. My gut twisted, and that's not something that happens to me easy. I know how I sound, maybe like I was overreacting. But something just felt wrong. She finally came back almost a full hour later. She walked in fast, like she was trying to make it look like she'd just stepped away for a second. But I saw the details, the flush in her cheeks, the loose strands of hair falling out of her bun, the lipstick smudge just barely on the corner of her mouth. She didn't look drunk, just off. Her smile was thin, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked if everything was all right. She said, yeah, just had to talk to Roger about a project. That was her boss, Roger. The guy with the 2 white teeth and 2 tight suits. The one she always said was just intense, but not a bad guy. I nodded like I believed her, but I felt like my ears were ringing. She didn't say much after that. Just held her drink and stared off while the VP gave a long speech thanking everyone for a successful quarter. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She looked calm, even bored. But her hands fidgeted, twisting her ring, tapping her nails against the stem of her wine glass. Little things. Things you notice when you've known someone for over 2 decades. We didn't talk much on the way down the elevator. Just the mechanical hum of the lift and that soft ding when we hit the lobby. Carla stood beside me, arms folded, clutching her little black purse tight like it held all the answers she wasn't ready to give. She didn't even say goodbye to anyone. Just walked out through the big glass doors and into the night like the party never happened. I followed her to the car, keys already in my hand. pressed the fob to unlock it. She slid into the passenger seat, not saying a word. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking garage. It was one of those humid nights that stick to your skin even with the windows up and the AC on full blast. For a while, the only sound was the tires on the asphalt and the low murmur of the radio, some slow country song about broken hearts and back roads. I turned it down. Didn't want lyrics doing the talking for me. A few minutes passed. I couldn't take the quiet anymore. "So, where'd you disappear to?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. She didn't answer right away. I glanced over. She was staring out the window like the city lights had something more interesting to offer than her husband's voice. Then she let out a little breath and finally said, "Just talking with Roger about that new campaign project." It ran long. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. Whole hour. She shrugged like it was nothing. We had a lot to go over. The way she said it, flat, almost rehearsed, made something behind my ribs tighten. I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But it sounded like something off a note card. She added, "He thinks I'm in line for a promotion." I glanced at her again. Her profile was all sharp edges in the dim dashboard light. She still wasn't looking at me, just picking at the seam of her dress, avoiding eye contact like it was contagious. "Well," I said after a pause, trying to sound normal, "that's good. That's real good." But it came out all wrong. Too stiff. Too bitter. Like I was trying to smile while biting down on tinfoil. She finally turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. "Aren't you happy for me?" "Sure," I replied, voice low. "You've worked hard. You deserve it." And I meant that, in a way. I'd seen her bust her tail for years. Late nights, early mornings, running herself ragged for that company. But now, every ounce of praise that came her way just felt tainted. Like it came with strings I hadn't seen until now. She went quiet again after that. Folded her hands in her lap. Every so often, she'd glance over like she was waiting for me to say something more. I didn't. I just stared at the road and counted the green lights like they were stepping stones across a river I didn't trust anymore. The silence between us stretched. Got heavier. It wasn't the kind of quiet you fall into comfortably. It was loaded. Tight. Like a rope drawn taut between two poles, ready to snap. We passed the gas station near the edge of our neighborhood. That's when I noticed her wiping her palms on her dress. Nervous, maybe. Or maybe just sweaty from the party. Hard to say. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to press. "Why didn't you text me back?" Or was anyone else there? Or even, "You sure that's all you were doing?" But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew the answers. And I didn't want to hear her lie. Instead, I turned into our street. The one with the old maple trees that hang over the road like a canopy. The headlights washed over the mailbox I fixed last summer, and the front porch swing I put up after Carla said she wanted somewhere to read on Sundays. We pulled into the driveway. She reached for the door handle before I even shut off the engine. "I've got a headache," she said soft. "Gonna go lie down." "All right," I mumbled. She got out, heels clacking across the concrete, and disappeared into the house without looking back. I stayed in the car a while. Radio still low, hands resting in my lap. I stared through the windshield at the faint glow of the porch light, flickering slightly like it might go out. All I knew was that the woman I'd driven home from that party wasn't the same one I married. And somewhere behind that cold quiet, I think she knew it too. 3 days passed since the party. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Her phone always face down. Her work blazer draped over the kitchen chair, smelling like some kind of cologne I didn't wear. The way she walked into a room with her eyes already somewhere else. I'd always told myself I wasn't the suspicious type. I trusted people until they gave me a reason not to. But now, I was starting to think maybe I'd just been lazy with the truth. Blind by choice. By the end of that week, I realized I couldn't go on like that, pretending. I needed to know. Not guess, not assume, no? I wasn't about to accuse her without proof. That's not how I was raised. My old man used to say, "Don't point a finger unless you're ready to back it up with something real." So, I decided to get something real. I called a guy named Dennis Meyer. Found him through an old buddy who used him once when his sister was going through a nasty divorce. Dennis had one of those plain names and a face to match, balding up top, glasses, average build, the kind of guy you'd pass on the street and forget 5 steps later. But he had eyes like a hawk and a voice like gravel. Said he'd been doing private investigations for 15 years, mostly domestic stuff, infidelity, custody, hidden assets. When I explained what I needed, he didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, I'll take care of it. We met once, in person, at a diner out by the interstate. He drank black coffee and took notes with a stubby pencil on a yellow legal pad. Asked me everything, her routine, her job, the people she mentioned at home, any recent changes in behavior. I gave him what I could, though I felt like a fool doing it. Like I was signing up to watch my own life fall apart in high definition. I'll be in touch, he said, folding the pad and tucking it under his arm. And then the waiting started. It lasted weeks. For to be exact. Long, slow days where I pretended to believe her stories, nodded through her conversations about this quarter's numbers or her boss's new tie. Every time her phone buzzed and she smiled, I wondered if it was him. Or them. Every time she said she was working late, I stared out the window like a hound waiting for headlights. Dennis checked in once or twice, never said much. Still digging, he'd say. Getting closer. I wanted to press, but I knew better. Let the man work. Then came the call. He asked me to meet him at the same diner. I drove there with my gut in knots. Part of me hoped he'd say he found nothing, that I was just being paranoid, that it was all in my head. But the moment I saw his face, I knew. He slid a thick envelope across the table, sealed with a little red paperclip. Everything's in there, he said. Photos, printouts of messages, dates, times. I stared at it for a second. My hands felt cold. I didn't want to touch it, like it might burn me. But I opened it. First thing I saw was a photo. Carla. Same dress from the party. In a parking garage. Leaning against a black SUV, head tilted up, smiling like she used to smile at me. And standing in front of her? Roger. Her boss. His hand on her waist. His mouth too close to hers. Another photo, same spot, different day. Another man this time, some younger guy in a suit I didn't recognize. There were more. Back hallway of her office building. Hotel lobby. Sidewalk outside a restaurant. A dozen photos, maybe more. Different clothes, different days, same look on her face. Same look on their faces. Like none of it mattered. Then came the messages. Printed text logs. Somewhere on a messaging app I'd never even heard of. But they were clear. Flirty words. Names. Plans. A whole double life spelled out in plain black ink. I didn't say a word. Just kept flipping through, feeling each page hit like a hammer. Dennis didn't rush me. Just sipped his coffee and let me read. When I was done, I sat back. My mouth was dry. My heart felt like a stone in my chest. How long you think this has been going on? I asked. He shrugged. Hard to say. But it's not new. That much I can tell you. I nodded, closed the envelope, and paid the check. On the way out, Dennis said, Sorry it turned out this way, man. I looked him in the eye and said, Me too. But deep down, I wasn't sorry. I was furious. I was gutted. And more than anything, I was done being the fool. We raised our boys to be men. That was something I always took pride in. Not just in the way they worked or shook a hand or looked someone in the eye, but in how they carried themselves. Respect, responsibility, and truth. That last one, truth, that's what tore at me most. Because now I had to sit across from them and unravel a lie that had been sitting in our home like a silent guest for God knows how long. James is our oldest, 32 this year. Married, steady job in insurance, lives about 20 minutes away with his wife Sarah and their dog, Daisy. Good head on his shoulders. He's the type who reads the manual before he puts something together, which ain't something he got from me. Mike's the younger one, 28, still figuring things out but sharp in his own way. Works with a construction firm, runs heavy equipment, has a knack for fixing things I'd have thrown away. Got a girlfriend, Amy, who I figured he might propose to soon. I called them both that Saturday morning. Told them I needed them at the house. Just the three of us, I said. No wives, no plus ones. I don't call those kind of meetings unless it's serious, so they showed up by lunch. We sat at the same kitchen table where Carla used to serve pancakes every Sunday. The same table where birthday candles had been blown out, where homework was done, where we laughed over burnt toast and cried over lost dogs. I looked at both of them and felt the weight of what I was about to say. I've got something to tell you, I started, sliding the envelope Dennis gave me across the table. James looked at it first. Didn't open it. Just stared at it like it might explode. Mike reached for it, slow, cautious. He opened it and pulled out the top photo. The one of their mom in the parking garage, arms around that man's neck. He blinked, then handed it to James without saying a word. They went through the contents the same way I had. Quietly, carefully, page by page. No one said anything for what felt like hours, though I'm sure it was only a few minutes. I sat there with my hands folded, watching their expressions change, confusion first, then disbelief, then something harder to name. Hurt, maybe. Disgust. Betrayal. When they reached the end, Mike set the papers down like they were hot to the touch. James just leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. "You sure about all this?" James asked, voice low. I nodded. "Private investigator. Been working a month. It's real." Mike let out a breath. Damn. Neither of them cursed much. That one word carried more weight than a whole speech. "She's been with." Mike started, then stopped. He shook his head. "How long?" "Don't know exactly," I said. "But it's not recent. It's been going on a while." James rubbed his face with both hands. "I mean, Dad?" "Mom. I know. She always made us promise to be loyal. Be decent. Do the right thing." "Yeah," I said, bitter in my throat. "Funny, isn't it?" Mike looked down at the table, his fingers tapping a rhythm that didn't belong to any song I knew. I never thought she was that kind of person. I mean, especially not now. Not at this age. Neither did I. There was another long silence. The kind that settles between men when there's nothing left to ask, only things to carry. So, James said finally, "What do we do?" I leaned forward. "We keep this between us for now. No drama. No public mess. I'm not looking to start a war. I just needed you both to know." James nodded. "Okay." Mike didn't say anything. He just sat back, arms crossed, jaw set tight. But I saw it in his eyes, same eyes he had as a boy when he found out his first dog died. That look that says the world just stopped making sense. "I didn't bring this to you to ruin anything," I said. "But I can't carry it alone." "You shouldn't have to," James replied. I looked at both of them, grown men now, men with their own homes and lives. But in that moment, I could still see the little boys who used to run through this house barefoot and loud, who still called her mommy, who thought she hung the moon. And now? Now they looked like something in them had cracked too. We sat there another half hour, mostly quiet. Carla was out, said she had to swing by the office, which hit different now. When they finally left, I walked them to their trucks. James hugged me. Mike just gave a strong pat on the back and nodded, jaw still clenched. As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange mix of pride and grief. Proud that they stood by me. Grief for what we'd all just lost, even if we couldn't say it yet. I went back inside, stood in that quiet kitchen, and stared at the empty table. Things would never be the same after that day. And deep down, I think we all knew it. Things changed after the talk with the boys. Not all at once, not loud or messy, just slowly, like rust creeping up the side of an old truck. Carla didn't notice it at first. She thought it was work stress or maybe the changing season, something she could shrug off or talk through over a glass of wine. But it wasn't. Not even close. James stopped calling on Sundays. Mike skipped the usual texts and didn't come by to mow the back fence line like he used to. Carla asked me once, "Is Mike upset about something?" I just shrugged and said, "Not sure. Maybe he's just busy." But I knew. They were pulling back. Just like I was. A slow retreat. Like all three of us were learning to unhook ourselves from someone we used to trust. Carla tried harder after that, in her own way. Started cooking again more often, asking if I wanted to go out for dinner, bringing up old stories like nothing had changed. She'd stand in the doorway of my workshop while I was tinkering with my radio or sharpening the mower blade and say, "Remember that trip to Asheville? You were so sunburned, you looked like a lobster." I'd nod, give a half smile, then go back to whatever I was doing. She noticed the change in me, I'm sure she did. But she didn't ask the real questions. Didn't want the real answers. She started watching me like I was the one keeping a secret. I could feel her eyes on me when I read the paper in the morning or got back from running errands. One night, while we were brushing our teeth, she looked at me through the mirror and said, "You've been quiet lately." I spit, rinsed, wiped my mouth. Not much to say. She didn't push. Carla never did when she thought she might not like the truth. It was one of her habits, ignoring signs until they became problems too big to hide. I, on the other hand, had finally stopped ignoring mine. About a week after I met with the boys, I looked up a lawyer named Harper Rowe. A friend of mine had used her during his divorce a few years back and said she was sharp, no nonsense, didn't play games. I called her office and set an appointment under the name Martin. Figured a little caution wouldn't hurt. Not yet. Her office was small, tucked behind a florist shop on Main Street. The kind of place most folks wouldn't notice if they weren't looking. She welcomed me in with a firm handshake and a stack of papers already waiting on her desk. We talked for over an hour. I laid out everything. The photos. The reports. The silence. I didn't sugarcoat anything, and she didn't act surprised. Just nodded, took notes, asked clear questions. Do you want to proceed now, or wait a bit? She asked near the end. I want to get everything ready, I said. Quietly. No drama. Just, right? Understood, she said. So I started collecting. Bank statements. Copies of titles. Insurance policies. Retirement accounts. Little things I hadn't thought about in years. I started scanning through drawers in the den and the filing cabinet in the hall closet. Carla noticed me sorting papers one night and asked, What are you looking for? Just organizing, I said. Been meaning to for a while. She nodded and went back to the kitchen. Every day that passed, I felt a little less like her husband and a little more like a man preparing for a storm he'd seen coming from miles off. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, just that quiet, steady feeling of a rope fraying between two hands. Carla, for her part, still hadn't caught on. Or maybe she had, and she was just clinging to the hope that things would drift back to normal if she smiled enough, cooked enough, asked the right questions in just the right tone. She'd say, Want to watch a movie tonight? I'd reply, Not in the mood. Should we go up to the cabin next weekend? Just the two of us. Let's see, I'd say, already knowing we wouldn't. Sometimes I caught her standing in the hallway outside our bedroom, like she'd come in to say something but changed her mind. I never asked what. Didn't see the point. And the boys? They kept their distance. When they did come around, it was quick visits, light conversation, polite hugs. They didn't call her Mom with the same warmth anymore. They still loved her, of course they did, but something in their tone had gone cold. Detached. She asked me again one evening, Why is James avoiding me? I shrugged. You'll have to ask him. But she didn't. She didn't ask them. Didn't press me. Just poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch like she always did, staring out at the yard while the sun dipped behind the trees. I watched her from inside, arms crossed, knowing exactly why things had gone this way. She just didn't know yet. But the distance was already there. And it was only growing. The day Carla came home with the news, you'd think she'd just won the lottery. I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip down behind the tool shed, when I heard her car pull in. She came through the front door practically glowing. Hair bouncing, eyes wide, big smile painted across her face. She dropped her purse on the table and said it just like that, I got it. I didn't ask what. I already knew. The promotion, she beamed. They made it official this morning. I nodded slowly, setting my glass down. That right? She laughed, an actual laugh, full and excited, the way she used to laugh before the cracks started showing. They're giving me a bigger office, new title, and a bump in pay. And Roger said. She stopped herself, like she caught the slip a second too late. Anyway, she added, smoothing her skirt, it's kind of a big deal. I looked at her for a long second, then said, Yeah, it is. I told her we should celebrate. I said we'd take the family out for a nice dinner, just us and the boys. She lit up at that, touched my shoulder, told me that sounded perfect. I smiled back, just enough to sell it. I made the reservation for the following Saturday. A steakhouse in town, one of those places with white tablecloths and prices they don't bother putting on the menu. James and Sarah confirmed right away. Mike and his girl, Amy, too. Everyone was on board. Carla spent the morning picking out a dress and doing her nails. She wore a deep blue number with heels I hadn't seen since our anniversary in Savannah. She looked radiant. The kind of radiant that might have made a man proud if he hadn't already seen what she was capable of behind closed doors. Dinner went by smoother than I expected. Lots of smiling, polite conversation, waiters topping off glasses before they were even half empty. Carla was glowing the whole time, talking about her new title, some regional leadership role that sounded like a mouthful. She didn't notice how James kept his jaw tight, or how Mike just played with his knife between bites. Dessert came, a big white plate with chocolate drizzles and a candle sticking out of a piece of cheesecake. The waiter said, Congratulations, and Carla clapped her hands together like a girl at her birthday. That's when I stood up. I tapped the side of my glass with my fork, light, just enough to get their attention. Everyone looked over. I cleared my throat. I'd like to make a quick toast, I said. Carla smiled wide. Oh, how sweet, she said. I raised my glass. To the beautiful career woman. May success bring you everything you've worked for. She laughed and did a little mock bow. Thank you, honey. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. Simple. Clean. No label. I handed it to her. She looked at it, confused. What's this? Open it. She slid a manicured finger under the seal and pulled out the contents. At first, she smiled, probably thinking it was plane tickets or a surprise getaway. Then she froze. Her eyes moved over the paper slowly. Her hand trembled just a little when she saw the photo tucked inside. The one of her and Roger, face close to his hand resting where it shouldn't have been. Clear as day. She looked up at me. I met her eyes and said, calmly and plain as I could, "Congratulations. You've been served, darling." No shouting. No name calling. Just those 6 words, and then I set my glass down. James looked away. Mike stared straight at her. Sarah and Amy were frozen. I turned and walked out. Didn't wait for the check. Didn't wait to see if she chased after me. I stepped out into the cool evening air and let the door swing shut behind me. Outside, it was quiet. You could hear the hum of passing cars, the sound of traffic from 2 blocks over, the clink of silverware from the patio. I stood there for a second, took a deep breath. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of pretending. I wasn't biting my tongue. I wasn't standing in my own house wondering who my wife was talking to on the other end of a locked screen. I was just me again. And she? She was finally starting to understand what she'd done. I didn't wait till morning. After I walked out of that restaurant, I didn't look back. I went straight to my truck, climbed in, and just sat there for a minute. Hands on the wheel. Eyes on the road ahead. The windows fogged a little from my breath, but everything outside felt clearer than it had in months. Then I drove home. Didn't play the radio. Didn't call the boys. Just let the tires hum and the headlights carry me forward. When I got home, the porch light was on. That soft yellow glow that Carla always insisted we leave on just in case. Funny, I used to love seeing that light after a long day. That night, it felt like a porch light on somebody else's house. I walked in, grabbed 2 duffel bags from the hall closet, and packed what I needed. Couple pairs of jeans, shirts, socks, boots, my shaving kit, the photo of me, and the boys from last year's fishing trip up at the lake. Left the rest. Didn't feel like any of it was mine anymore anyway. I didn't slam drawers or stomp around. I moved quiet. Careful. Not because I was worried she'd walk through the door, but because I wanted this to be clean. Controlled. Not like the mess she made of things. Before I left, I turned off my phone. Took out the SIM card, dropped it in the kitchen drawer next to the old batteries and twist ties. That was it. By the time Carla probably looked up from that envelope and started panicking, I was already halfway to the cabin. The cabin had always been mine. Bought it back when the boys were still little. Tucked away near the edge of the state park, past a dirt road most folks didn't even notice. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a wood stove, and a porch that looked out over the trees. No Wi-Fi. No neighbors. Just peace. It was where I went when I needed to think. To breathe. And that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Real silence. Not the kind where something's hanging in the air waiting to break, but the kind that fills a space and settles deep in your chest. I made coffee on the old stove and sat out on the porch while the mist burned off the trees. That was the first time in years I felt like I was in my own skin. Carla called, at least a dozen times, I'm sure, but I didn't see any of it. I'd cut off the line, and I had no plans of reconnecting it. A few days later, I checked my new phone, fresh number, clean slate. I'd left the old one behind like a shed snakeskin. Mike and James knew where I was. I'd given them the address, told them I was okay, and that I just needed time. They understood. I think part of them felt relief too. Like they were done pretending, done smiling through something that didn't deserve it. From what James told me later, Carla showed up at his house the next morning. Knocked on the door, mascara smudged, voice shaking. Said she wanted to talk. Sarah didn't let her pass the porch. Mike didn't even open the door when she tried his place. Just watched her through the peephole until she left. She didn't know it yet, but her bridges weren't burning. They were already gone. I spent a lot of time thinking those first few weeks. Not about revenge or bitterness, but about how things had gotten to that point. I kept going back in my head, trying to find the moment, the choice, that led her down that road. Was it ambition? Was it boredom? Was it thinking I'd never notice? Did it matter? All I knew was this. Her big promotion, her shiny new title, the office with the glass windows, and the executive parking spot. It came at a cost she never saw coming. She traded her marriage, her family, the trust of 2 grown sons who once saw her as the strongest woman they knew. And in the end, she got what she wanted. She just had no one left to share it with. Meanwhile, I was chopping wood, making coffee, and watching deer walk through the woods like I used to when the boys were small. It hurt, sure. A different kind of pain. Not sharp, but deep. But it was clean, honest. And more than anything, I felt free. Free from lies. Free from pretending. Free from standing in the same house with someone who wasn't really there anymore. Carla might have gained a corner office, but I got my peace. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. For months after I handed Carla that envelope, it was over. Divorce finalized. Property split 50-50. Clean on paper, but nothing about it felt fair. Not to me. Not to the boys. Maybe not even to her, in the end. She didn't fight much. Not really. Her lawyer tried a few times to contest small things, the lake cabin, the truck, some savings accounts, but nothing stuck. I think deep down she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. Too much shame, too much guilt. Or maybe just too tired to keep up the act. The house sold. I let her keep her half. Took mine and added it to what I'd already tucked away. I didn't need much. Never did. The cabin became home. Small, simple, enough. After the paperwork was done, Carla tried going back to her new role, VP of something or other at the firm. Big office. Big title. Lots of meetings. But the shine had worn off fast. James told me she'd quit 6 weeks later. Didn't even give a proper notice. Just walked out one day, left her key card on the desk, and never came back. Said she couldn't handle the pressure. Couldn't focus. The people in the office started whispering about her breakdowns, about her being distracted, crying in the bathroom during lunch breaks. She started seeing a psychologist after that. Tried therapy, self-help books, meditation. I don't doubt she wanted to change. Maybe she even meant it. But some things, once broken, just don't go back the way they were. I didn't hear from her directly. Not once. Not a text. Not a letter. The only time I knew what she was up to was when someone mentioned seeing her at the grocery store, or when Mike passed along a tidbit he'd heard through the grapevine. The boys kept their distance. That part hurt her most, I think. She hadn't just lost a marriage, she'd lost her sons. Her anchor. Her pride. 2 years passed. Mike got married in the fall. Beautiful little outdoor ceremony on a farm outside of town. Big white tent, string lights, golden leaves falling like confetti. Amy walked down the aisle in a dress that shimmered when the sun hit it just right. I walked her mother to her seat, and I stood next to Mike as his best man. He said he wanted me there, not just as his dad, but as the man who taught him what strength really looks like. Carla wasn't invited. She found out the way people find out everything these days, through photos. Someone posted a few pictures from the wedding. Mike in a navy suit, Amy beaming beside him. Me in the background, holding a glass and smiling like I'd finally found solid ground. She didn't comment, but I heard from James that she saw it. Didn't take it well. Said she'd expected an invitation, even if she wouldn't come. That line told me everything. She still hadn't understood what she'd done. Or maybe she had, and it was just too late to fix it. Another year passed, and then James had his first child. A boy. Born with a full head of dark hair and a set of lungs that could rattle the windows. His name was Henry. I held him in my arms the day after he was born. James snapped a photo, me rocking the little guy on the porch of the hospital room, a soft blanket wrapped around him, the tiniest yawn stretching his face. Beside me was someone new. A woman I'd met out at the bait shop, believe it or not. Kind eyes, quiet strength. Someone who'd seen her share of hurt too, but never let it make her bitter. She held my hand in the photo. We weren't trying to make a statement, just living. James posted it with a simple caption, "Happy Grandparents." That was the moment Carla finally broke. She deleted her accounts the next day. James got a message from a mutual friend, something about her sobbing, shaking, saying over and over that it was supposed to be her in that picture. But it wasn't. Because the woman who was in that photo didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't throw her family away for a pat on the back from some man in a suit. Carla started fading after that. No one heard much about her. She stopped going out, stopped calling anyone. Word was, she started keeping the curtains drawn, quit answering the phone. Depression, they said. Some kind of collapse. Nothing dramatic, just a slow fall into herself. I don't say all this to gloat. I'm not proud of any of it. But it matters. It matters because there's a cost to betrayal. A price that doesn't show up in court records or bank accounts. It shows up in empty seats at weddings. In cold phone calls. In the quiet realization that no job, no title, no office can fill the space left by the people who once loved you. Carla chased something shiny, and in the end, she caught it. But when she turned around to show it off, there was no one left standing there to see it. That's the story, start to finish. Share your thoughts in the comments. Does revenge always have to be loud, or is quiet, calculated justice more satisfying? If you like the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.